Welcome to Buddhism for Business and Abundance. I'm John Mueller, former Buddhist monk, and in this video, I'm going to show you the 6 life hacks that Buddha taught that can increase your happiness, your success, and your freedom. Okay, so let's just get into it. I used to be a monk and meditation teacher, and Buddha taught so many things that are really useful for me and that I've applied to business, right? So I'm a 6-figure spiritual, entrepreneur, and I've had a lot of success in lots of areas of life, and a lot of my success comes from the principles of Buddhism that I've practiced. So what I decided to do is just start sharing more of the actual things that I'm truly practicing myself, and so that's what this series is all about. Now, just a little caveat, everything that I say in any videos or anytime I ever talk about Buddhism in general, I am never trying to push it on anybody. That's not how it works. If you push an ideology onto someone, they will eventually reject it. And that can be very, very harmful. If it's a very beautiful, thing, they shouldn't reject it. They should integrate it. And so Buddhism is never pushed on anybody. It's just something that we can take little bits of it like we're at a buffet. Right? So everything I say, imagine that you're at a buffet and you get to take a little bit of this, but you get to leave certain things behind. And if you like something, you can take more of it. That's how this goes. And there's never any pressure to adopt, to become fully Buddhist or anything like that. There's some helpful thoughts here that you may want to try out. Okay, so this is coming from someone named Nāgārjuna. And he wrote in something called Friendly Letter, he wrote 6 lines that are just so beautiful. There's 6 lines and they each reveal one of Buddha's most sacred practices called the 6 perfections. Okay, and so each one could become a whole separate teaching. But in this video, I'm just gonna do like an overview, and maybe in the future we can go into each one individually. Okay, so these 6 lines are: from giving comes wealth. From discipline comes happiness. From patience comes beautiful forms. From effort comes the fulfillment of wishes. From mental focus comes peace. And from wisdom comes freedom from obstruction and liberation. So I'll say those again. From giving comes wealth. A lot of people are wondering, where does wealth come from? Wealth comes from giving. Also, pleasure comes from giving. Enjoyment comes from giving. Really, all the good things in your life, especially enjoyments, pleasure, wealth, these things come from giving. Why is that? It's because of the law of karma. So if you plant seeds, if you plant certain types of seeds in the ground, you will get fruit that is a match for those seeds, right? So if you plant seeds of, giving, you get seeds of receiving. Right? You get what you give, right? If you plant seeds of anger and hatred, you get anger and hatred back. You get bad experiences coming back to you. So the law of karma says that all of our actions are causes and all of our experiences are effects. So everything you do is a cause and everything you experience is an effect. Now, it's actually really helpful to look at this. The law of karma is the most important universal law that exists. It's like the universal law. And I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about karma because people think of karma as being bad, right? People say, oh, karma, I don't want to create karma. Well, you're always going to create karma. Karma just means action. Karma is a Sanskrit word that means action, but it refers to the relationship between actions and effects. Right? Actions and effects, or cause and effect, right? So we can all agree that causes have effects. I used to be into Newtonian physics, right? The physics of like movement and motion. And we used to look at like billiard balls, like playing pool, right? And so if you hit a pool ball with this kind of force, it goes this direction with this amount of force, right? It's like there's a cause and there's effect. And then that effect is a cause of something else. Maybe that one hits something else and it goes this way, right? And so every cause is an effect and every effect is also a cause. It's really interesting. It's like a chain reaction, right? And now, in order for cause and effect, or the law of karma to make sense, we have to understand a couple things. Number one, we have to understand that reality is subjective. And so we're talking about you and your life. We're talking about you and your causes. What are your causes again? Your causes are actions. What are your effects? The effects that you experience are experiences, right? So all of your experiences, especially your feelings, are effects. But where do these come from? They come from previous actions. And those actions may not be from this life. In fact, they're mostly not from this life. Okay, so in order for the law of karma to make actual sense, we have to understand that our personal reality is subjective. And so what we personally put out, we personally get back. And so instead of trying to fix the world externally, we have to realize that every person is experiencing the effects of their own particular karma or actions, right? This doesn't mean to not have compassion for them. It just means that we know we cannot solve situations from the outside, because unless a person changes or purifies their actions, they will keep experiencing negative effects, right? If we want to help anybody, we have to help them to purify previous actions and to sort of have discipline and to, do positive actions. And giving is just one type of positive action where you're planting seeds for your future receiving, right? And again, this makes sense when you zoom out and look at the continuum of multiple lives, right? Otherwise you say, oh, but how come a bad person is receiving so many things, right? Why is a bad person having a good life? Why is a good person having a bad life? It's because the actions that they're creating in this life are seeds that haven't ripened yet. They're in the earth, they're in their kind of heart, they're in their soul, they're in the universal field, the quantum field, right? And so they've planted these seeds that will ripen someday when the conditions come together. Does that make sense? Let me take this out. When the conditions come together, their seeds will ripen. Just like in a field, right? A seed cannot ripen by itself. It has to have certain conditions. It has to have moisture, sunlight, nutrients, that kind of thing. Okay? And so, and that's the reason. And so in someone's previous lives, they may have practiced a lot of giving and generosity, and then in this life, they experience the effects of that. That's normal, right? Even some animals, even some dogs and cats experience a life much better than some humans, right? Some humans have, like I live in Morocco right now, and there's just like anywhere in the world though, people are living out in the streets sometimes, they're barely able to survive. There's dogs and cats that live on the street too here, and some of them are struggling. And yeah, so why is that, right? It's like unless someone's karma changes, their experiences won't change. And if they're experiencing some karma ripening in this life, it's not something that we have control over. Like even Buddha cannot change something that's already ripening. If it's already ripening, there's nothing you can do about it, right? Even God can't help. Like there's nothing you can do except for accept it when it's already ripening. But a person can do some purification, and maybe there's other seeds in there that would continue their negative experiences, and they can purify it, and they can start to create positive actions now and just pray. Like prayer, doing lots of prayer, devotional prayer, is like adding water to the situation. It can ripen your seeds a lot faster. So there's a lot someone can do, but it's a spiritual path that would help them, and not necessarily someone from the outside. That's why all these organizations don't really work, right? There's been charity organizations forever, but how come there's still animals and people living out in the streets, people hungry? Why? It's because these problems cannot be solved from the outside. Everybody's living in their own dream. Everybody's having their own subjective experience of the world. And unless they change their karma, unless they change their actions, and kind of purify previous actions, nothing's going to change. Okay, so anyway, that's karma and future lives, kind of some foundational topics here. But from giving comes wealth means that if you want wealth, you have to practice giving. Now, there's like two major types of giving that we would practice, right? Or two major like categories. You can practice offerings to enlightened beings and holy beings, right? Making offerings to your spiritual guide, to, in this case, we would make offerings to different Buddhas, right? You could make offerings, maybe you have a shrine of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary or something. Who knows? Like, everyone has their own practice, and I'm teaching you the fundamental mechanics of how it works. Apply it to your own faith, right? I'm not trying to convince you to make offerings to Buddha right now. But a Buddhist would make offerings to all the enlightened beings. There's countless enlightened beings. There's not just one type of enlightened being. Like, Buddhism doesn't have the belief that Christianity has, right? So like, right, Buddha, right? You can see like a little statue of Buddha, right? We don't believe that there's just one Buddha and that he came and it's a miracle and there's grace, and like, that's not how Buddhists think, right? According to Buddhism, there's countless enlightened beings, and that every single person will become an enlightened being in the future. Every single person, every single animal, everything with a consciousness becomes enlightened at some point. And once you're enlightened, you stay enlightened. It's not like some people think that they had an enlightenment in a previous life and now they're not anymore. That's not how it works, right? Enlightenment is a permanent state of freedom and happiness that is completely transcendent. And if you have a question about whether you're enlightened or not, then I'm sorry to tell you, but that means that you're not, because enlightened beings are omniscient. They know everything. So the qualities of Buddha are different than the qualities of, say, God, right? Buddhism does not believe in a creator God, but it believes in enlightened beings, right? And so, in my opinion, Jesus Christ is an enlightened being, right? The same category or class of being as Buddha, right? That's my opinion. I can't prove that, but I feel like I know it, okay? And so, but either way, according to Buddhism, there's countless enlightened beings, and enlightened beings are all-knowing and they're all present. So they're omniscient and they're omnipresent, but they're not omnipotent. They're not omnipotent. They're not all-powerful. According to Buddhism, the only thing in the universe that's all-powerful is karma, right? The law of cause and effect is infallible. It's flawless. It is it's all powerful, because if seeds have been planted and causes and conditions come together, right? So the seeds are the causes, the conditions come together for them to ripen. Once that process is starting, nothing and no one can stop it. And if those things don't come together, nothing and no one can wish for it to happen and make it true. Does that make sense? So this is how Buddhism refutes the understanding of a creator God. There is no all-powerful God, and it's really simple, because if there was, a God or whoever could wish for something to happen, could wish and intend for a thing to happen, but if the karma doesn't come together for it to happen, then it won't happen. And if the causes and conditions come together for something to happen, and that God wishes for it to not happen, it doesn't prevent it, it still happens, right? And so we say karma is all-powerful in a way, but there's no being that's all-powerful. Karma is not a being. So there's no all-powerful being, and that makes sense. Actually, this worldview makes complete sense. Because why? Well, think about how enlightened beings function in your life. Enlightened beings appear in your life every single day, and my life too. Enlightened beings are everywhere at all times, actually. All enlightened beings are everywhere at all times. Their energy, their consciousness is everywhere. And you even experience like manifestations and emanations of them in your reality, right? So you might walk to the store and you're in a certain mood and somebody just smiles at you in a certain way, and it uplifts you in a way and gives you faith in humanity again. and it sets you off on a different track. Like, that was probably an enlightened being who just knows your mind and knows your consciousness, your disposition, and knew that it wanted to like get involved in your life in some way to help you change course or to uplift you in some way. So that's like more of like a physical manifestation, right? I think that if we look, we can find countless examples of enlightened beings in our life, right? I feel like I've dated many women who are enlightened beings, but the thing is, because of karma, because I can only experience the effects of my own actions, they cannot save me. They cannot do it for me. They can help me on my path. They can support me on my path. They can help me to change my consciousness a little bit. They can maybe prevent me from making some really bad decisions, but I experience things directly related to my own actions, and you do too. And so that means that no one can come into your life and just save you. There's a Buddhist phrase that says, enlightened beings cannot remove suffering from you like they would remove thorns from the flesh. And they cannot give you enlightenment and attainments and realizations as you would give somebody a present. But they can teach you the path, right? So enlightened beings cannot remove suffering and pain from you like removing a thorn from the flesh. And they cannot give you gifts like happiness and enlightenment and liberation and freedom and peace. They cannot give you this like you would give someone a present, right? But they can teach you the path. And by teaching you the path and blessing your mind, enlightened beings constantly bless our minds. It's up to us to open to receive it with faith. Faith is what opens us up. Faith, appreciation, gratitude opens our mind, and we can receive blessings. But also there's a path that we have to practice that someone can teach us, right? Jesus taught a path, Buddha taught a path, different teachers. That's why do you think spiritual guides constantly appear in the world? To teach a path, right? Even beings like Bashar, right? They're teaching a path. Why? Why is it always about teaching someone the path? It's because a person has to engage in a path, which means they have to take certain actions and have certain beliefs in order to experience results, because that's how karma works. They cannot just give it to you. They can teach you, and you have to do it yourself. They can support you. They can show up as people in your life to encourage you to practice, to keep you on the track. There's lots of miracles. I think miracles happen every single day, right? And Buddha certainly performed miracles, and there's so many examples of enlightened beings throughout India and Tibet that perform public miracles. I don't understand why somebody who has a Christian mindset thinks that only Jesus performed miracles. It's not possible, right? If you just look in other theology, if you just like open up some Indian books or some Tibetan books, like you'll see well-documented miracles in their traditions, like from many people, not just like one person that everyone thought was special. Like lots of people can attain this. We can attain it. We've been able to do miracles in previous lives because miracles only require concentration to do. They don't require perfect attainments. They require concentration, right? And if we have concentration, but we don't combine that concentration with special ways of thinking, it can degenerate and we don't have it in our next life necessarily, depending. So anyway, zooming back in, so there's two different ways to practice giving. We can give to people, we can give to enlightened beings and make offerings to them, and then we can make offerings to people. We can give to, it's not called an offering, it's called giving. So you can give to people. So I could go to my wife and I could give her a gift, but I don't just give the gift. I think I'm giving you this cake now, or I'm giving you the time or whatever. I'm giving you this enjoyment now. May I give you enlightenment in the future, right? So you kind of combine gifts with prayer. So you give someone something small, but you can combine it with a prayer. I'm giving you this now. May I be able to give you enlightenment in the future. And that plants a more powerful seed, doesn't it? It plants a better seed. It's not just a normal giving. In the same way with when you give to enlightened beings, when you make offerings to them, you're basically using a prayer. You're saying, I'm making this as an offering to Buddha, not because he needs it, but because we need the karma. We need to create that action. We need to plant those seeds. So we do it. Buddha's already fulfilled. He doesn't need anything, but we can make the offering, and then we can make a prayer. May I receive attainments. May I be happy. May I be able to bless the minds of others. May I become enlightened, right? And so, anyway, back to what I was saying about enlightened beings. Like, it definitely makes sense, right? That there's no all-powerful being, or else they could just snap their fingers and end suffering. They could just snap their fingers and give you happiness. What would be the point of always teaching the path? What would be the point of all these spiritual texts? They could just boom. And people come up with all these different beliefs, like, oh, they just want God to love you, and they just want you to love God. They just want, you got to get the lesson. Well, if they're all powerful, can't they just give you the lesson? If they're all powerful, can't they just make you love them? Right? And so nothing makes sense until you realize that enlightened beings are not all powerful. They are all knowing. And so that means that their mind has become one with everything at all times. So their mind has become one with all phenomena at all times, past, present, and future. And they understand the precise relationship between cause and effect and the true nature of reality. And their mind is constantly in bliss, and they just know everything. And they can teach you something according to your own disposition, knowing your karma, knowing how to help you. But it's up to us to practice it and to listen and to have faith and to receive their blessings. And a lot of times we have, a lot of obstacles and obstructions in our mind. And so there's a path that requires some effort. So anyway, that was the first one. From giving comes wealth. If you want to experience wealth in the future, practice giving now, and you can even practice it in your imagination. You can even imagine and believe that you're giving everybody everything. You can just imagine that you're giving everybody in the universe everything that there is to give. And you just kind of really imagine that they receive it, and you can even pray that they receive it. You can pray that I'm giving you this now, may I give you enlightenment in the future. And then you can dedicate it through my action of giving. May I receive attainments, may I become enlightened and liberated so that I can serve others more in the future. So anyway, from giving comes wealth is the first step. The second step is called from discipline comes happiness. From discipline comes happiness. So why is that? Discipline comes from happiness because when you practice discipline, you're holding yourself back from negative actions. That's what discipline is in this context. So you see an opportunity to engage in a negative action. Maybe I'm out and there's a beautiful girl and I'm gonna consider talking to her, right? And then I think, no, I'm not gonna even go down that road, and I'll hold myself back. That's discipline. Discipline is where you hold yourself back. It's kind of like stepping back from the edge of a cliff, right? When you engage in negative actions, what it does is it plants negative seeds in your mind, and these seeds can ripen when you die, and you can experience a lower rebirth. So you could experience a rebirth as an animal, as a hungry ghost, or as a hell being. Hell is not a permanent state of being. Hell is not a permanent state of being. We've all been to hell. Everybody's been to hell. And we've actually spent a lot of time there. But it's not a permanent state of being. But the three lower realms get us trapped, right? So we get trapped in the lower realms as an animal, as a hungry ghost, and as a hell being. And we get stuck there. And being a human is like being above the ground. Being a human is like you're on solid ground. Like the three fortunate realms are humans, demigods, and gods. Not all powerful, but they're more refined than humans. Their minds are more elevated than the human mind, right? But the human experience is the perfect existence to practice spiritual paths. It's like if someone's not practicing a spiritual path, they're not really embracing their humanity. there's nothing useful about a human life unless you're practicing spiritual paths. There's nothing, in that case, you're just an animal who has better experiences than an animal, but you're headed back to the animal realms after you die, most likely. And the thing that would protect you from going back to the lower realms is discipline. That's like the most important basic human practice. It's just like refraining from non-virtue, refraining from causing harm to yourself or others, right? If I were to cheat on my wife, that is a negative action that causes me harm and it causes her harm, right? And so I would hold back from that. Or maybe there's an action of stealing. Maybe you have an opportunity to steal something. Someone drops their wallet on the ground. If it's not yours, then stealing it is wrong. Then by taking it, you're stealing it, right? Unless it was given to you, it's stealing. And so you just don't take it. That's a negative action of stealing, right? If you buy a program from somebody and then you don't pay them like your next payment, but then they don't realize it and you just stay in their program receiving, but you haven't paid, that's actually stealing, isn't it? Right? If you do it consciously, it's stealing. So stealing is the reason why we become impoverished, right? If you're experiencing poverty, one of the causes of that is stealing in previous lives. The other one is miserliness. So it's interesting. Miserliness is where we have an opportunity to give and we want to give. The intention is arising to give. We might even say that we're going to give, but then we hold back out of miserliness, out of like personal greed, out of fear of loss of our stuff, right? So if I tell my wife, we're going to go on, we're going to go on this great vacation as an act of giving to her and give her all these enjoyments, and then the opportunity arises and then I don't take it because of, if I have the means to do it and then I still don't do it, I think that might be considered miserliness. Also, it's like if someone is asking for money down on the street and you have the wish to give to them. You have the money in your pocket and a wish arises to give. And then you hold yourself back because you're worried about not having that. You're worried about not having it for yourself, right? Some fear of loss of the money. That's called miserliness, right? If you could do something really nice for someone and you might even, promise that you would or you intended that you would, and then you hold back out of fear of loss, that's called miserliness. And that miserliness is why people get born in the hungry spirit realm. They don't have any food and drink and they're starving and thirsty all the time. They can't even drink without, if they ever do find food, it becomes like fire in their mouth and it like disappears right in front of them. It's like mirages. They're getting tortured. And that's the realm of previous actions of miserliness. So anyway, in previous lives, we all practiced miserliness and we all stole. And so you may be experiencing the effects of those actions. I know that I have focused very specifically on purifying my own previous actions of miserliness and stealing and trying to kind of like burn up those seeds that I've planted inside of my soul, my heart, and just like releasing them and burning them up and purifying them. And by then doing the opposite as well, by giving, by holding back from stealing and from other negative actions, it creates a foundation. It creates a solid ground. You can then be happy. And what the real meaning of this verse means that you will take fortunate rebirths as a human. So if you practice discipline, you are creating the cause to be born as a human. And humans have happiness more than animals. Humans have a basic level of happiness. Generally, we have generally good lives. And animals don't, because animals are always being fed on by one another. They're experiencing hunger. They have no home. Animals, just think about it for a second. Animals have no home. They experience heat and cold, struggles with finding food sometimes, struggles with being food for others sometimes, and then humans exploit them for entertainment and food. Animals do not have a better life than humans do. And yeah, animals are just one example of a lower rebirth, and discipline protects you from taking lower rebirth. So that's the real meaning of the word discipline. But even within this life, we can see like even many famous athletes and business people will say that discipline leads to happiness. And it does, right? Discipline creates a boundary around yourself. It creates a protection, right? If I'm always practicing discipline, not just with like business or work, but with like harm, like I'm preventing myself from harming myself or others. I'm holding back from causing harm to anybody, is really what discipline means. That's the essence of it, is that we're never going to cause harm to ourselves or others. And if we practice this, it creates almost like a protection around us, a force field. And how can you hurt someone that does this? Like you can't, right? This person can hurt themselves by taking negative action, but if you keep your actions pure and positive, you're protected from falling, from grace, right? It creates a container, and if the bigger and better our container, the more goodness of life that we can hold, right? And it's like you can hold nectar. All the goodness of the universe can pour into you and stay there. Whereas if you do a negative action, it's like putting a crack in your container, and everything, all the goodness of life flows out. And this is my experience when I left behind ordination. At some point I kind of left. In 2019, I walked away, early 2019, I walked away from being an ordained monk. And it was like my container got cracked. And even though I was trying to live a good life, my container was cracked. And all the goodness that I had collected over years, it drained out. And I experienced a very, very, very low point after that. And I had to build it back up without having a center to go to, without having a spiritual center and spiritual friends to be around. Whew, that was the lowest point of my life. But after that, I learned how to do some business, and I learned how to create a spiritual community around myself, and I landed in a good place, but it took an enormous amount of effort, and I had a lot of struggle. And it's because my container was cracked through my own breaking of a commitment. So the most advanced way, the most beautiful way to practice discipline is to not just have internal decisions and promises to avoid harming others and to whatever else you're practicing and promising. It's actually to make vows, right? To make sacred vows in front of a preceptor, in front of spiritual friends and a spiritual, teacher. And I did that, right? So in Buddhism, there's many, many types of vows that a person can create. And one of them is the ordination vow. It's just one type. There's other types. And Buddhism doesn't say that everybody should become ordained as a monk or not. No, there's never a part of Buddhism. It's the opposite. It's almost like people will discourage you from becoming a monk or not unless they can see that you're actually really serious and that you're going to stick with it. It's a lifelong promise. It's not just something that you do for a summer, right? It's something that you do for life. And I didn't, right? I broke my promise. I broke that commitment. And it put a hole in my container walls. And as a result, the energy leaked out. And all the goodness, I had been like riding this wave of goodness that I've been collecting for years. And I just like had it there. But because my discipline was intact, it kept it. It kept it inside. But then when this major type of discipline was compromised, it put a hole in the container wall and literally felt like the nectar of life, the nectar of the goodness of life leaked out. And I was left feeling empty and flat, and it was very difficult. But so discipline is what protects you from creating anything negative. And that is, there's a lot of Eastern philosophy that supports this, even like Qigong and Tai Chi and those energy practices from the East, from China. Energy medicine and Chinese medicine would say things that echo this, right? They say that it takes years and years to build up your character, to build up that container, has integrity, that can't break. And you build it up over years and years and years, and you can hold all the energy, all the goodness of life over years. And just like a house, it takes longer to build than it does to break, right? Because they say it takes years to build, and then in a moment you can lose it. You can break it. You can lose your character. And they compare it to being like a house. A house is very easy to destroy. You can destroy a house in a few hours, right? But it might take, if it's an elaborate house, it might take years to build, right? And so that's like you building your character, and discipline is how you do that. It's the things that you say no to that create a boundary, and your boundaries put together become your container walls. And so if you want to have a better life, you need to find bigger and better things to say no to. Your spiritual practice has a structure around it of all the things that you say no to, right? You may say no to drinking and drugs. You may say no to having speech that is meaningless and especially harmful, but at some point you even promise to never even have meaningless speech. I've done that, and that's why my speech is powerful, right? It's because I don't have meaningless speech, right? Meaningless depends on intention. Meaningful speech just means you speak with good intention to benefit others, and meaningless speech would be without any particularly positive intention. Anyway, and so you can, if you want to practice this, start by deciding to not ever harm yourself or others and live by it every single day. And you want to find bigger and better things to say no to. For example, one of the highest levels of discipline within Buddhism is actually within the practice of Tantra, where in Tantra, you overcome ordinary appearance and conception. So you stop thinking of yourself and others and the world as being anything other than enlightened self, others, and the world. So in Tantra, you imagine that you are an enlightened being, that other people are enlightened beings, and that the world is an enlightened world, and that all actions are enlightened actions. All experiences are enlightened experiences. So that's how you practice Tantra, actually. There's a lot more to it, but that's the essence, that's the basis of Tantra, is imagining and believing that you are in an enlightened world as an enlightened being, experiencing enlightened enjoyments, and everyone around you is enlightened, and that all actions are enlightened. And so that is Tantra. And so the opposite, the thing to avoid, the thing to say no to, is called ordinary appearance and ordinary conception. And so you would actually have a discipline to never see anything as ordinary. Ordinary is the opposite of enlightened, right? And so if I see my wife as ordinary, it means I'm not seeing her as enlightened. If I see myself as ordinary, it means I'm not seeing myself as enlightened. If I see Susie or Timmy as ordinary, I'm not seeing them as enlightened, and so I can't receive benefit from them in that way, right? If I think the world is ordinary, if I perceive and believe that the world is ordinary, then it is ordinary for me. But if I believe it's enlightened and see it that way, it becomes enlightened for me. And gradually we create it by believing it and imagining it. So this is just an example of a very high level thing to start saying no to. Ordinary appearance and conception, seeing things as ordinary, believing that they're ordinary, which means anything other than enlightened. But you can see that's something that has to be practiced. There's a big basis. There's a lot of a foundational practice that has to be underneath that for it to be effective. Just an example of a higher level thing to say no to. Some Buddhists say no to selfish intention, right? Anything selfish, anything that's purely just to benefit themselves, that is neglectful of others, right? If someone is focused on themselves, believing that they're more important than others, and they simultaneously neglect others while focusing on themselves and believing that they're more important, that's called self-cherishing. That's a self-centeredness. And it's really just a belief that we're more important and that we're the center of the universe. And a lot of Buddhists will decide to never assent to that, to never go into that, to not take actions from that place. It's a very sneaky one, but that's just a high level thing that you could say no to, is like a self-centeredness that is It's not about self-care. It's about believing that we're the most important thing and simultaneously neglecting others. That's something that we would say no to, but it requires a lot of perceptiveness to see it when it arises and to clearly say no to that while also loving and nurturing ourselves in a positive way too, which is possible. Okay, and so we have from discipline comes happiness, from giving comes wealth, from discipline comes happiness, from patience comes beautiful forms. So I'm not getting into this video is going on pretty long, but from patience comes beautiful forms means that we practice patience, and that if we want to have beauty in our life, we need to practice patience. And I think of like the gym. I think of someone who's like putting effort into their physical fitness. It requires patience, right? When you're lifting heavy weights, there's an amount of patience that you have to be practicing. When you're practicing business or anything, like there's a lot of patience required to like do meaningful things. But when we do them, we become more beautiful to others, right? We actually become more beautiful. And so anger is the opposite of patience. And anger makes us ugly, right? If someone's angry in your life, you just want to run away from them, right? No one repels people faster than an angry person. If you want to repel people in a way where they stop trusting you, get angry at them and they will stop trusting you, right? But what if you were patient and accepting instead, right? Then people would love you, they would trust you. And in other words, you would appear beautiful to them. You would appear beautiful. The most beautiful people are the most patient people. That's why everyone trusts beautiful people. Actually, beautiful people are more trusted than everybody else. They're more trusted, but why? It's because they've created the cause of beauty. Well, they've created the cause of beauty, which is patience and acceptance in previous lives. And a patient and accepting person isn't going to harm them. A patient and accepting person is a loving person. They're not going to get angry. They're not going to harm someone, and therefore they're more trustworthy. That's why. And so anyway, I can go into this in a different video. I feel like this is a good place to stop. Please enjoy and look out for the next one where I finish these 6 steps. All right, have a beautiful day and go put this into practice however you can. All right, have a good one.